Only do what's going to bring you closer to your end goal. Because like we were saying earlier, whatever you get known for is what you'll be paid to do.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Creative Haven. I am thrilled for today's episode because I talk to Wes Evans from Icarus Burning, another fellow filmmaker that has found a career in being creative, expressing his artistic expression of film and cinema, and quitting the corporate world to start his own company. And so I'm going to have Wes actually talk more about his background and how he came to where he is today.
Yeah, it's a pretty random story, man. And first of all, thanks for asking me to come on. I'm happy to be here. And I listened to some of your past episodes, and it's really interesting conversations that you've been having. And I know how challenging that can be as a podcast host myself. So well done, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So my background is weird. It's varied. It's all over the place. It's the American journey. Because I grew up super poor, man. I can't even stress that enough. It's not like I grew up with a camera in my hands or money in my pocket. Like at one point in my childhood, I kid you not, I was living in a trailer with my family, single wide, not a fancy double wide like some of you, bolo tie wearing fancy pants out there. I literally was sleeping in a fold out bed sofa with my two big brothers. So like we didn't have water running in the house. We had an outhouse. We didn't have shower at a certain point in time. We literally bathed in the yard with a water hose. So like, now this wasn't like the majority of my childhood, but that's the kind of place that I'm coming from. So believe me when I say that anybody can rise through, because growing up, my mission wasn't to be a filmmaker or creative in that kind of way. I thought my only goal was I just want to work in an office. I don't want to be manual labor. Everyone in my family was either manual labor or in the military. And that just wasn't my life. That wasn't what I enjoyed. And so my goal was I want to work in an office using my mind somehow. But at the same time, I knew I wasn't going to get into a college because of finances. I was smart enough. I was a really good student as far as grades go, and not a good student in terms of my study habits. But I showed up and I passed tests, and all that. And so my goal was I want to work in an office. And so out of high school, I made my way into the tech industry. Worked my way up and eventually landed in this position right at the start of YouTube when they were kind of getting going. And I made my way up and I kind of built out this, very large, at the time it was the largest YouTube channel in the world. And I was not satisfied. I was like, I would rather be, creating things. And at the time I was acting and I'd grown up as a writer. So I was really in love with like screenplays and screenwriting. And evolved that into thinking, you know what, acting sounds really fun. So I tried out acting and fell in love with acting and that part of the freedom of storytelling as an actor. And eventually, got a job as a video editor. So I was kind of putting all these pieces together inadvertently. And the problem with all of that is, especially being an actor, is you don't get to really choose the projects. You're kind of you have to be cast. You have to be chosen for a good project. And it's not easy, to have Linkletter just knock on your door and say, hey, would you audition? And I had an agency, I had a representation, and I was getting auditions, but none of the projects were really usually that exciting. And so eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm not in love with this corporate life. I'm just going to buy a camera. And at the time I spent $1,000 on this little 60D Rebel. Yeah.
Rebel series all day. Mine was a T3i.
Dude, nice. That was the first one I was looking at. And I talked to my buddy Shannon, who's now works on a lot of really cool sets, like the morning show and that kind of thing. And so at the time we were working together at this company called Demand Media. And he was like, no. There's this new one that's about to come out. It's the 60D, man. It's got a swivel screen. It's got it's great. Like the heat capacity is a lot better. So I was like, okay, so I spent $1,000 and just learned. I just taught myself. I shot and I was already an editor. And I think if you know how to edit, shooting becomes so much easier because you know what the edit is supposed to look like. And so now you can just shoot those pieces. Like you don't shoot as much extra stuff whenever you already understand, the edit that you're trying to put together in post. And so just started teaching myself. And at a certain point I had job offers because I was running, a really successful social YouTube channel. I got an offer to work on Jay-Z's channel and moved to New York, which is my favorite city. I had another offer from the same company to work in their LA company, working with a lot of other talent, and they didn't quite meet the number that I wanted. I set a number. I was like, and I'm very much a cut and dry, like yes or no person. Like, here's my rate. You can either afford it or you can't. And so I told them, here's the number that I would need to justify moving my life.
Right.
And my agent at the time, I went to him. I was like, look, I got these offers, but if you tell me I can make it as an actor, and you'll get me more auditions around the country, I'll drive wherever. Just get me the opportunities. And he's like, stay with me, believe in me. And I did, and he didn't. And so at a certain point, like the funds that you've saved up start to run out. And I just started, I got well enough to where I was making my own projects, shooting music videos, and people started asking me to create stuff. And, I learned After Effects, and I'm a very, imaginative person. So you just kind of start putting all these random pieces together, and eventually it turns into a portfolio, and people just start kind of paying me. And at first it's not a lot, but through networking and a lot of hustle and determination and kind of backing myself into a corner, I think that's one of the best things that I ever do is convince myself I can do a thing before I really know how I'm going to do it. That's really, the way to get the most out of yourself, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why like a lot of people would cram before a test, and you take on projects. I think the good ones and the smart ones take on projects that you say you can do, but deep down inside, you're like, I don't know if I've done this before, but you're gonna figure it out. You're gonna figure it out. With your story, you've climbed out of the gutter. You've basically made your career, made your life the way you wanted it. So why not do that with projects? So that's so inspiring. And so now tell me more about Icarus, because now like you went from working in the corporate world, building a huge YouTube channel, and then saying, fuck it to these job offers. I'd rather just be an actor and be creative. You bought a 60D. The acting career didn't pan out as you wanted during then. Still can happen right now. And now you were just creating videos just so that you can pay rent and also be creative. And then it turned into a company, and now you get to be creative full time. So how does that feel? And let's talk about Icarus Burning and what you do.
It's so wild. I went to Atlanta. I had a very close friend moved to Atlanta a couple years ago, and I flew out there to visit her and her husband. And we all went out to lunch, to brunch, and we were having mimosas. We were about to order some outrageous, pancake and bacon setup, and at this really nice place. And her husband is an artist, and he does like artwork for a video game company, and she's a full-time artist, and we're all just artists. And he turns to me and he says, how cool is this that art is paying for our lunch? Did you ever think that art would be paying for your trip here and for your meals? And I was just like, wow, I'd never once considered that. And I told him that same story about when I grew up, I just wanted to work in air conditioning. Like I didn't think I would have an opportunity to make a living creating. And it is humbling. And so, I've just been really fortunate. And also, there's been sacrifices. Like there's been really lean times when I think the important thing is to keep creating what you want to be creating. That's the only way you're ever going to get there. If you get known for making something you don't like, if you don't like doing wedding videos, then you shouldn't be making wedding videos, because that's what you're known for, is what you're going to get paid for. And so acting has been really hard right now because everyone knows me as a filmmaker. No one knows me as an actor. And so the reason I got into filmmaking, I'm not even able to execute right now. But that's on me. Like I need to choose to act more. I need to create more projects for myself to act in. And so that's my next challenge that I'm working on. But it's been amazing, man. I've got so many projects. My portfolio like isn't even up to date anymore. I don't even really use it. Like people go and look at my reel and they're like, oh, this is really cool. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's like 3 years out of date. Like I need to really like update it. But if you don't have to, and this is the tricky part, because this is how I paint myself into bad corners where I don't have client roster full, or I might run out of money in the bank, because I appreciate money. I'm a very big capitalist and free market, personality, and philosophical believer. But at the same time, I personally don't care about money that much. Like, I want to get paid what I want to get paid for my projects. And beyond that, I just need enough to get by. Like, I'm not, trying to stack up and be a millionaire for the sake of having a bunch of money. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I promise all that money is going into movies. Like, I'm suddenly like, I'm funding your movie and I'm funding my movie and everybody gets a movie. I'm Oprah all of a sudden. And all my buddies were making everything that we want to make. And so I really just work to create value for my clients. And I take every project absolutely seriously and put everything into it, no matter how silly it is. Like, I shot a boot commercial, or not even a commercial. It's like a boot information video yesterday for a boot company here in Austin called Tecovas, which is based out of, I believe, Mexico City. And I was just making this very simple little talking head video. And I went in, just focused. I spent all day yesterday prepping and going through my shot list and really thinking, how can I make this the best that I can make it for the client? And what does it need to be? What is it trying to be? Not what do I want to make it, but how is this video trying to express itself? And I put that into every single project, no matter if it's going to be a portfolio piece or not, because I never want someone to regret working with me. I never want someone to say that was the wrong choice, never hire him again. And that's not to say every project, goes absolutely the way I want it to. I've certainly had projects where I'm like, that one was a stinker. But I don't think there's ever been a project that I would say I was the fault. Now, I can always find my place in it where I said, I let this slide and I knew I shouldn't have, where the client doesn't get you the script until the day of the shoot. I knew better. I let that happen, even though I tried to work against it. And, clients, as you know, they'll press and they're like, no, we have a deadline. And eventually it'll bite you. So that's how it is on me, even though it wasn't my choice, it was at the same time, I had power that I neglected. And so that client's never worked with me again. Those things happen, and you try to, see how I can do better and how I can grow. But every single time I step to the plate, man, I'm absolutely swinging and trying to get, whether it's a single or a home run, I want to know what I'm trying to get and why I'm trying to get it, and do the absolute best that I can do on every single project.
You have
even coming onto your show, man, I was prepping for the last hour and a half. Like, here's all my notes, and I want, to make the best podcast episode I can possibly make, with you. So
and I appreciate that. No, that's good to know, because a lot of people who have creative lifestyles, there's the idea of, I have to find my muse, I have to find my inspiration in order for me to have the best work. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to create my best work. And there's others like out there, and I can tell it's like you and me and other folks out there who treat this like a business. It's like, when I'm called to the plate, I'm swinging. I'm not going to sit there and say, I don't feel like swinging at the ball today. It's like, no, I'm at the plate and I got to swing. And I totally agree with you. And I admire you for saying that, because there are times where you work with a client that you could, like you said, you paint yourself into a place where you can't pay rent or you can't pay expenses, and you need to take a client that may or may not be something that aligns with you. But at the end of the day, you're getting paid for your art. So do your best and use it as training, use it as practice. And also, this is probably that one video that someone else is going to see out of nowhere and hire you, and then hire you for that big job that you always wanted. And it happened to me actually a few days ago. I was filming for a client and I was just in robot mode. And I get on set. There was like problems left and right. The location got switched 30 minutes before everyone was supposed to get there. So we all turned around, went to the old location, and everyone was freaking out. And for me, I've been in worse situations. And for me, I'm like, all I need is to get my camera lit well in these areas. I've got my shot list all planned out. Sound guys here, producer, just make sure that all the talent are calmed down and that the product is ready to go. And at the end of the shoot, the producer came up to me and said, man, you are so detail oriented. I have to hire you again. It was this moment where he was so appreciative of my work ethic and my attention to detail. And in my mind, I'm like, this is just what I do. It's like, this is just what I do. And just like what you said, it's just what you do. And for you to get prepared and to be passionate about everything you put out there, that means that you love your work, that you love who you are and how you put yourself up there. That means you respect yourself. And I appreciate that. And then for you, when you do work with a client and you get to that moment where you have the note session, right? And you get those notes and you feel like you put your all into this project and you get those notes that say, I don't like it, I'm going to change this, and that. How do you balance between giving what the client wants, but also giving them what you suggest as an expert in the field?
It does vary between clients and productions because I'm a creative director on Chocolate Milk and Donuts, who's you had Ricky on before, Ricky
Oh,
Holm.
yeah.
And so whenever it's his project, it works differently than if it's just my Icarus Burning, production. And for me, the difference is usually I'm pretty cut and dry. Like sometimes a client will make a suggestion and it's just, no, we're not going to do that. But and it just depends. It really does depend on what the note is and what they're trying to accomplish. And it comes down to taste, man, because at the end of the day, you're right, we're the experts. But you also have to have wiggle room. If a shot is bothering a client, you need to find another way because at the end of the day, it's their product and it's their name that's on the line. But at the same time, it's also our name that's on the line. So we do have to walk a very fine line because it's both of ours. It's a collaboration. I'm not a hired hand. I'm not a hired gun. I'm here to be a partner, not a broom that you just push around and do a job. Like we're in this together. And so it does range. Like there was a client that I had recently that wanted some things that really did not align. We were telling it was a film, and for the most part, Ricky was doing all the liaison work and taking all the notes. And there was a thing that the client just kept wanting, and I kept telling Ricky, and poor Ricky has to negotiate between like a jerk artist and a demanding client. And so I have so much empathy for that guy, but I'm just like, man, this isn't going to work, And finally, I was like, put me on the phone with the client, and we start going through their notes. I'm like, hey, here's what, and so I try. It's a give and take, you try to sandwich it together with, here's what I'm giving you, here's what I'm going to get, and then here's what I'm also going to do for you. And so you try to layer it in a way that it's, you're winning someone over. You're not, forcing someone's hand. And so it's like, hey, yeah, I see what you're saying on this one thing. We're going to make this edit, this and this. This isn't going to work. And so we're just not going to do that. But what I am going to do is what we can do is this, this, and this. And so you try to be as congenial as possible. And if they push back, then you can kind of have a deeper conversation. But ideally, it's salesmanship in a sense, because you don't want to talk yourself out of a thing by talking too much about it. And so the more condensed you can make it, and just there's a saying, assume the sale. I'm assuming my note is my note, and we're just going to move on. Like this isn't a debate that we're about to have. This is just what's going to happen. And so a lot of my client work, whenever I'm working with clients, is like that, where I'll look through their notes. And I try not to do any of that in person. I'm a very emotional person. I'm very sensitive. Like
Are you a water sign?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Scorpio for what it's worth.
Oh, okay, you're Scorpio. There you go. That's still good. Got that fire in you.
And so I need to kind of look through the notes, yell and curse on my own, and then read through them again. And I'll usually say the second time through, oh, that's not so bad. Like the first time through, it just cuts. And then the second time through, after I take a walk and come back and breathe, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what they're saying, actually. Yeah, that makes sense. We can do that. And so it's usually about 70%, 80% of the notes I'll do. And then the other 20%, I'll tell them why we're not going to do it. I'm not going to say, can we? I'm just going to say, hey, that's not going to work because of X, Y, Z. Or it's best if we don't do that and instead do X. And if it's a very severe problem, we'll usually hash that out. I would say that's probably only been pushed twice over the course of the last 9 years I've been a full-time filmmaker. And both times it's like, okay, it was because there's bigger issues that we need to work through. And that's fine. Like I'm okay with, okay, we need to have a sit down and work through this section of a project. But by and large, you try to see it through their eyes, exercise empathy, and then say, okay, will that work? If so, why would it work?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of starting with that offhand, they're wrong. The client isn't always wrong. This might surprise a lot of people. The client is an expert in their field, just like you're an expert
Yeah.
in film, and you have to, respect their expertise and take that into consideration. It can't just be an out of hat dismissal just because they're not filmmakers. You have to understand they're an expert in their field as well. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason they're probably asking for these notes.
Yeah.
And you just have to write. It takes a lot of consideration. You can't dismiss or do anything instinctively on a knee-jerk basis.
Yeah, and like you make a good point, because there are some times where you work with a client, like direct to brand, like with their marketing department, or you work with an agency with like a creative director, or you work with the CEO of a company if it's a smaller brand, and those are different people, different roles with different skill sets. And what happens is that sometimes the creative director is super creative, but he probably doesn't know as much as the marketing director or the CMO when it comes to getting it conversions and sales. But the marketing director or CMO is not that creative, and then the CEO has the vision, has the purpose, the mission, what's behind the company, but then he doesn't know how to make a video. So
Yeah.
it's like you try to find that perfect combination. And that's why when it comes to creative business and creative professionals, it's a very interesting time where content creators are becoming marketers and marketers are becoming content creators, because you started off at YouTube, and with YouTube it's become a creator focused and creator driven platform, but also a data driven platform. And so now the creators have to know the data. You have to know the algorithm. You have to know how to have your watch time increase. You have to find ways to be the next recommended video. And so rather than just being, oh, I'm just going to create the most awesome stuff, you look at your analytics and like, I have to do it on a Tuesday at 12:30 for this type of demographic, for this trending topic, and blah, 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 blah. And so for you, with your background, building the largest YouTube channel, also being an actor, also being a screenwriter, how does that help you altogether service a client and a brand?
Yeah, what's funny is that I really do love data and analytics, and I did it for several years. Running all of our YouTube channels, and after I got finished with that, I by and large shucked it all. I was like, you know what, I'm done with, especially like YouTube analytics. But it still gives me insight, and I understand how SEO works, and I know
Mm-hmm.
what people are trying to accomplish. And so I think it helps in the sense that I know how to have those conversations, and I know how to parse data. And if someone's talking about conversion ratios, and I can participate in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't drive almost any of my business, because ultimately my big goal isn't to get back into data. It's to tell stories and movies.
That's right.
And so I focus all of my energy on how can I make this progression? How can I take my next step as a filmmaker into my ultimate goal of making feature films and documentaries? Because if I'm not moving towards it, then I'm either static or moving away. And so I think you have to be forcing your way through. But I think moving through corporate America has also helped me understand a lot of how business decisions get made,
Right.
and timelines. We were waiting on a pitch proposal, and it was for this last big project that we shot in Texas and Seattle at the start of the pandemic. And Ricky was like, man, I haven't heard back. I think XYZ is happening. I think we're done. And I was like, no. Here's what's happening. They think it's going to take them so long to get through this process. They didn't factor in how many people and the fact that they got to get feedback from their higher ups. And then on top of that, they got to find time in their own day because they still have the regular jobs that they're trying to do. And so the classic mistake of someone who's not a creative is to underestimate the time that it takes to turn
Right.
around these projects. And so they just underestimated. I promise we're in the running based on what I know about the industry and this field and this specific project and what we're bringing to it, because we just had too many things that were fitting the Venn diagram. I just knew that we would be in high consideration. We ended up landing the gig, and he waited to tell me at the perfect time and all that stuff. And it was a perfect bromance moment. And so, but it takes a lot of like understanding and perspective so that you don't get frustrated in the process. Because it's easy to, as an actor, you get so used and numbed to walking into auditions and giving it your all and then never hearing back from them ever again. It's constant ghosting and not indirect rejection. Like, you just so get used to it that whenever I send out proposals or pitches, I don't expect anything back. Like, I do everything I can to control my moment. And then beyond that, I just start looking for my next thing. It's a fix. Like, I'm just, what's my next fix? What's my next project?
Wow, that's so cool to hear the transition between being an actor and facing rejection, and then using that thick skin and experience to help you with pitching to clients and dealing with rejection there. And when you are pitching to clients and whatnot, you're telling them, okay, this is how you make videos to grow your brand. This is what you should do to help you get conversions. But how do you turn that back towards you, right? And use creativity to grow your brand, and use marketing and sales for yourself rather than just telling someone else how to do it?
Yeah, so I actually made some notes on this because it's such an interesting question that I don't think I'd ever directly thought about, but indirectly it was influencing every single decision that I ever made, and as a filmmaker. Because to me, the number one way to grow your brand through creativity is through passion projects.
Nice.
Because those are what allow you to stretch or flex your creativity. And because for a number of reasons, passion projects are going to draw people in, and also as a way to find overlapping passions. Whenever you love something, you're excited about it, that's just kind of a natural segue for someone else to get involved and to add their own passion to it. There's no easier way to get someone's emotional investment than to care yourself. And if you're not doing that, then I don't even know what we're talking about in the first place. but I think the reason that is because passion projects create connections with other people. They're a natural networking event because of the passion and the long hours or the crazy circumstances that passion projects inevitably require. And connections are the most important thing, in my opinion, on growing your brand, because you are your brand. Let's not try to separate that too far out. My brand is Wes. It doesn't matter if it's through Icarus Burning or it's through Chocolate Milk and Donuts, or if it's being white labeled through some other corporate project. I get hired out second, third hand all the time. And at the end of the day, they're bringing Wes in. They're not thinking about Icarus Burning. They're not thinking about CMD. They're thinking about Wes when this happens. And so my best clients are almost always born through networking, and collaborations create the absolute best networks, whether that's, through my short films. I've made so many connections. That's one of the ways that Ricky and I really got to know each other. And it's one of the reasons why I'm making a living now as a writer director instead of still just doing only corporate projects. It's because I wanted to see what my small team could do. And so I wrote a short film. I cast myself, of course, and we went through the whole process. We did casting, we did location scouting, we did the post. Obviously, on set is its whole thing. And I remember pulling Ricky aside at one point before production started, and I was like, "Dude, thank you so much, for everything you're giving this. Like, you're really coming through." And he's like, "Hey, this is what we're doing it for, so that one day people are going to stroke us checks so that you can keep doing this." And that was years before he started his own agency. And so I was both surprised and humbled whenever he reached out to me one day and he's like, "Hey man, I really, really like you as a writer, and someone approached me with the script. I was wondering if you would take a look and consider a rewrite." And I was like, first of all, do I have the permission? Because I'm never going to step on another writer's work. I understand as a writer how emotional that is. And he's like, yeah. I already asked them. They said that they're completely fine with that. Here's the thing. It's in 360, so you got to think about that. And I was like, okay. So I rewrote everything with the idea that this is a 360. And this was my first time writing for 360. And then, I wrote another small project, and Ricky came in one day and he's like, "Hey, let's have a meeting. I'm launching this immersive tech agency, and I wondered if you would be interested in being my official creative director." And that would mean XYZ. When we have a project, you would write and direct, and you would oversee these projects. And whenever we're looking to pitch, I sometimes would bring you in based on if I have budget for you or whatever. And then you can, help me with the pitch and create, and we're just going to go forward with this thing. And he's like, I like working with you. I like that, I like how you write. I like how you direct. I think you're talented, and I think we can do something great. And he's a hustler, and he's got business acumen. And it was just it was exactly what I've been needing, because I am not a natural networker, man. It's not that I hate people. I hate crowds, and I hate networking. I like who I like, and I'm going to be around the people I like, regardless if they can help my career. I have so many people who are absolutely useless to my career, and I'm okay with that. And there's so many people that I could be friends with that could aid me, but we just don't click, and I'm not going to force a connection just for the sake of getting ahead. That's just not my personality. Whereas Ricky's friends with everybody. Like, he doesn't know anybody he doesn't like. And so that's just the perfect harmony. And we really built those foundations through passion projects and collaborating. And it's also just a great way to demonstrate your creative aspirations and build out your portfolio, right?
That's right.
It's how you get to be seen and known for what you want to be doing. If you don't want to do reality TV, you shouldn't be out shooting reality TV. You need to be, doing the thing that you want to do so that you'll be known for it and get paid for it. Because the not so secret thing about the world, not just our industry, but the world, is no one's going to pay you to do something you haven't done before. They're only ever going to pay you if you've done it already. And it's catch-22. And so that's how you can do it, is through free projects, passion projects, wherever you can. Sometimes they'll be paid through miracles and signs. It's not a lot, but it happens. But I think it's most important with your free projects specifically, to be specific with those projects. Free is good. Don't shun free. Shun it if it's not what you want to be doing, if it doesn't overlap or it doesn't challenge you to grow your skill set, because it can get you really awesome subjects. For me, whenever I was first starting out and I knew my portfolio was missing, it had some gaps, because I wanted to do doc work, but I didn't have any doc work in my port. And so I set out looking at, like, okay, what's some companies that I love that I would love to create for, who don't have anything? How can I meet their need and also meet my own need at the same time? So I started looking at companies here in Austin, where I'm based, and there's this cider company called Austin E-Cider. And so I reached out to them because I was like, I was a huge cider guy. And this is before ciders became cool, which I don't know if they're still cool or if they've kind of come and gone already.
Oh, seltzers are cool now.
Okay.
The seltzers have taken over.
True. And so I reached out to E-Cider. I was like, hey, I'd love to do this, create a doc for you guys for free, and you can use it however you want.
Nice.
And I reached out, through their socials, and I tried to make a connection. They never got back to me. Like, I never heard back. And so I was bummed, and I took a trip down to wine country to Fredericksburg with a friend, and we spent a weekend there drinking, and we came across this vineyard called William Chris, and I loved their wine. I loved their building, and their vineyard was gorgeous. And so I was like, oh, I can see the images in my head already. A sunrise coming over a vineyard, like all the things. And so I was like, hey, this woman that was serving us, would you mind introducing me to your manager? And talked to the manager. I was like, hey, do you think your company would be interested in a free video documentary about your vineyard? And so I talked to the owners. He put me in touch with the owner, and I was like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I need. It'll cost you nothing except supplies. Like, if you're going to have to supply me wine, not to drink.
A whole year's worth of wine for my collection.
And they did. Like, they hooked it up, and it was beautiful. It was a lot of 3 a.m. wake up calls, so I can get down there before sunrise and set up and get the shots. And, it's a labor of love, but that's why they call it a passion project, not a paid project. But, and it filled a gap, and it created a new connection. And that would only come if I had done it for free, because at the end of the day, they had so many people offering free work. They just weren't going to pay anybody. And that was fine. It fit my need at the time. But it grew me. It grew me a little bit. And now when someone goes to my port, they see all the things that I can do. And my demo reel, 60 seconds of just striking. I want to just win you over in 60 seconds. It's fast. It's visually impactful. I'm not wasting your time. And every single shot matters. And so I was just thinking about all of that while trying to create.
Nice. Dude, that's
one other way, if I may.
Go ahead. Please.
One one other way that I'm using creativity to continue growing our brand. And I mentioned earlier, I have a podcast. I do film analysis, and I do it every single week. We're up to like 140 plus episodes now.
Yeah.
Where we just break down a movie. I watch it once, twice, sometimes 3 or 4 times. And it's a creative outlet. You know, it's fun to sit and talk with your best friend about movies.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm just trying to understand filmmaking better, film theory, storytelling, how are the mechanics working? And so doing this, it's fun and it's so satisfying. And it's also just a natural brand exposure. Like I create backlinks to my production website,
Nice.
Which is always good. And I've gotten better at analysis with my client projects, so I can step in and look at what they're trying to do, and I can say, oh, here's what's going to work and here's what's not. And I'm more comfortable personally inserting like film theory into my work. And so every time I'm working on a project, I'm going to be able to say, okay, here's what I think would make sense from a film theory perspective, and I know how it's going to work just based on all the analysis that I've been doing. It's gotten so much more comfortable to insert film theory and have those theory conversations, and also to see what someone's trying to accomplish. And I do it all the time, and sometimes in ultimately meaningless ways. Like I like naming conventions that are just fun, and sometimes like there's a naming convention I did in my last film. The client doesn't know about, Ricky doesn't know about, but I did it just for me. Like it's just these little, bits and pieces that you're constantly working through. And I do a lot of that. And so it's all there. It's all creating exposure, introducing new people to you. And if you can get your clients, for me, like some of my clients listen to my podcast and now I'm in their ear and they know me as an expert and an authority on film. And so it's just all reinforcing who I am and what I'm about. And maybe most importantly, it energizes me because it's like, what would it be like to insert this idea into a film? Well, now I got to know. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, I'm a film studies major. Like film theory was my whole college career. I mean, we were just talking about Plato's allegory of the cave, and we're talking about different theories of like how several shots, montages, German expressionism, cinema, like different types of styles. And what you're saying right now, it really speaks to me, because when you do things for free, when you do your passion projects, it's authentic. It comes from you. And if you truly are an artist or a filmmaker or whatever creative professional you are, you should be doing that for free anyways, because that's what you're passionate about. That's what makes you happy. And I'm reading 80/20 Principle by Richard Koch right now. And what he says is just like, you really have to find those, 20% activities that give you 80% happiness. What are those? What are the things that make you 80% happy? And it only takes 20% of your time, or you only spend 20% of your time on it. How can you enhance that? And as a creator with a passion, as a filmmaker, if you are out there just doing branded content and this gigs, there's going to be a time, because I get it all the time, where you get burned out and you don't feel as passionate anymore. And I have my passion projects. I have my short films, my feature film that I'm writing and raising funding for. And at the same time, right now, it's like I'm new in town in Austin, and I found a pretty big, well-known break dancer here, and I love shooting dance content. So we're just going to meet up, and I'm going to shoot some content around Austin. And
I didn't realize you were in Austin now.
Yeah, I'm in Austin. Yeah, no, we should meet up.
Yeah.
And my bread and butter is breaking films, b-boy films, and videos, and I'm just going to crush it, because it's because of me filming for brands. It's trained me. I consider it as my training. Like, this is my MBA, this is my master's, this is my MFA. I'm working with brands to learn about business, marketing, advertising, and creating videos. And that's why when you say creating, free content and passion projects as a way to build your brand, people see that. People hear your podcast and say, this guy knows what he's talking about with film. They see your passion project and like, oh man, he did this with nothing. Imagine if I give him 10K, 25K, 50K. And at the same time, you're not bound by deadlines or notes or expectations. I found it when I was traveling. I traveled 2 years ago around Asia. I was just creating visual effects heavy travel content. And because of that, I got so many gigs from it, just because I said, oh, I just want to travel. And I always tell myself, I had a challenge 5-6 years ago where I said, when I travel, I have to shoot and edit in a day and post. So that technique, or that method, or that process, that workflow, it makes it easy for me to deliver a client reshoot in a day. Like if I can travel to Bali and shoot a whole tour and then edit 3 hours later and then post it at 12 a.m. Like I'm good. I can shoot and edit and deliver however I want. I'm just that trained.
That's so funny, like, because 5 years ago, I was really nervous about going handheld,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I am too comfortable on sticks and on sliders. I need to get super comfortable going handheld, and so I created this self-imposed project to work on that skill set where I stripped everything away. My mission was, I'm going to give myself 30 to 60 minutes. I can only take my camera and two lenses. And most of the time I
Nice.
just stuck to the 24 to 105, the classic.
Yeah.
And because, it's
F4.
F4 image stabilization. And I was like, and I had a C100 Mark II
Oh,
that I
hell
just
yeah.
got, and I still rock that thing.
Oh,
That
the
thing is amazing.
100. The C100.
So good. And I said, so I'm gonna get my camera and a lav mic, and that's it.
Nice.
I literally took nothing else on set with me. And my mission was, I'm gonna have to walk into a place that I've never been with no lights, and shoot, something in 30 to 60 minutes. And I called it my passion profiles, because
Nice.
I was usually just shooting someone who's doing something they love. And so this could be dancing, this could be, someone doing art, someone fighting, someone working out. Like, what is it you love? Okay, I'm gonna guitar. Like, so it was all passion projects, and I gave myself a very strict timeline, in order to make sure I'm getting everything I want and getting a 5-minute interview. And then, same thing, I get, a few hours to cut it up, and turn it around, and now I have something to post to social. But more importantly, I've gone through an exercise, and I'm getting better. I'm understanding how to evaluate good lighting and how to create good lighting whenever the options all look bad. And of course, the safest thing is, reverse key lighting is my favorite thing in the world, man. I
Ooh.
just use it to no end. And so I'm curious. And so I did that for, on the 6 months. I think I did 15 projects or so, and got so much more comfortable where it almost became a detriment. I was preferring to go handheld in spaces where I was like, okay, I should put this on sticks now.
You're like, I'm not gonna sit here for a 60-minute interview on handheld.
So I'm curious, man. You said you're working on a feature script, and I want to pick your brain about that.
Oh,
Like,
please,
what's
let's
that
get into
process
it.
been like for you, to write a script, and what would the genre be?
Yes, I love it. The tables have turned on my podcast.
It.
No, so it's the process was, I, as a filmmaker, I grew up wanting to direct feature films, and this, I've always said to myself, I have to film something and direct and write something that has to do with my childhood as a Filipino immigrant DJ. And in my mind, I always wanted to create four um, features, my ode to hip hop. Hip hop was a huge, influence in my life, and so one would have to be about DJing, one about MCing, one about breaking, and one about graffiti writing. And 2 years ago, I said, when I had a business coach who said, "What do you really want to work on?" And I said, I've always wanted to be a feature film director. It's like, why don't you just do it? And I said, you know what? Fuck yeah, I'm going to do it. And so I created an outline. I started, entering it into like Sundance Lab and Film Independent in LA, and trying to get it into some labs. And it just wasn't great. And I just didn't have, I'm not a writer. I haven't been writing for like years and years. So I partnered with a friend of mine who is a very experienced and successful writer. And he said, yeah, I'll write it with you. We were in the PGA diversity program together a few years ago with a script, and he helped me write this. And, kudos to him for just taking charge of like creating an even better story out of it. And now we're funding it. We're trying to find funding for it. We're going to investors, we're going to production companies, we're finding different ways to fund it. We just created our sales deck, And the process was me creating the treatment and the outline, him taking a stab at, his version of the story, going back and forth on the characters, and then creating a first draft, going through a few revisions. And it was a very interesting process because it's a feature film with 3 stories with 3 different with the same timeline. So think about like Run
Okay.
Lola Run, or like Go,
Yeah.
or Traffic, or just those type of movies where it's like a cast that has different stories for the same outcome. And I think it's a great story. It takes place in the late 90s in Los Angeles with the Asian American community, and it tells a story of like 3 characters. One's a Filipino nerd who wants to get attention and love, so he becomes a DJ and loses himself. The other one is a Chinese parachute girl who just wants to have family and connection, but ends up making the wrong friends and becomes, a drug addict, and ends up throwing a huge party at her parents' house that ends up turning violent because the third character is this gang member who wants to get out of the gang, but always gets, thrown into the wrong situations. And when he feels like he thinks he's in love, he gets used. And because of that, turns on that person, and something happens at the party. And so that it was such a really cool story. It's based on a true story. And it's just so cool. Even just talking to you about it right now, I'm passionate about it.
So, man, I have so many questions. First, what are you going to be using? So I'm assuming maybe you've seen like the whackness, like the soundtrack, and the whackness is just phenomenal, right? And so are you going to be trying to source like some 90s tracks for the film?
Of course. I mean,
yeah,
the whole idea. Right? So Wes, I mean, we're going to go deep. Okay. We should go deep on another podcast about this, because I had to ask you questions. But for me, this as a DJ, like the reason why this is going to be very music focused is that the soundtrack is going to be a mixtape. And so the whole idea is to create a mixtape of of all these 90s tracks, but they're different characters. You have like pop, music. Oh, hold on a second. I just lost my camera. So you have like pop music or like, mainstream top 40 music for the DJ. And then you have more of the Asian, foreign type of music for the parachute girl. And then you have gangster rap, for the thug. And it's just creating a mixtape. And like my whole vision is just, when you start the movie, it's just the start of a mixtape, and when you end it, it's just like I don't even want to say how it's going to end because I don't want to like ruin it.
Yeah,
it's a mixtape.
Dude, that's so dope, man. I mean, 90s best music, ever.
Yeah, I know. There was a renaissance in the 90s, and then I think the 2000s when corporate music took over, and then I think the last of the renaissance of music came around 2008 and 10. Although there may be some, saying that COVID is going to create some great music, but so go ahead.
Second question is that's a period piece, so like I can see, I'm curious, like how set deck and production design and wardrobe, how do you envision that like impacting budget?
Yes. Yeah. So the way that I've thought about it is there's a movie called Gook, which is this black and white movie that takes place in the early 1990s during the LA riots. And it's the story of this young Korean kid who works at his dad's shoe store. I don't know if I'm messing this up, but he has to protect his shoe store from Roman gang members during the LA riots. At the same time, he has this friendship with this young girl. And anyways, it takes place in the early 90s, and they had a very low budget. So it really came down to just finding ways to have limited locations, and also locations that don't have that much exteriors. But at the end of the day, if I get a big enough budget, I want it to be all 90s clothes, Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, Eddie Bauer, and the same time with the Cars, the Rice Rockets. And during that time, just the style that people had, this slang, right? So I'm going to bring a lot of that 90s slang back. And it's all going to be,
man, it was tight.
You know what's hilarious? It was tight. It was super tight. And so what the funny thing is too is that I was creating the mood board for the sales deck, and then I was looking online for different pictures from the 90s and looking for mall glamour shots. And there was nothing out there. And I realized, you know what I have to do for this pitch deck? I need to go home to my parents' house and just take out all my old photos, and I will show people what the 90s were because I grew up in it. And so that's the whole process and everything. But Wes, I gotta ask you though, what's your creative process? All right, because
So
as a filmmaker, how do you create your films? Right?
yeah,
How do you get in your creative flow state? Because I, for one, I'm in this process where you've been, where you've created films, you've written films. And so how do you create these characters and these moments for pitching as
it's
well?
so funny. Like it's so much easier, and it always depends on what I'm doing. But for like a client work, I had to write, this 45-minute film, and it was relatively easy. I mean, it came with challenges and setbacks, but as far as sitting down and writing, it came very strangely easy, as opposed to whenever I sit down to write my own feature, which I just completed, not quite the first draft, but I got all the plot done for,
Nice.
and now I'm short like 20 pages, and so I got to find 20 pages.
You're at 60?
Yeah, I'm at
70?
51. Well, I was at
Okay.
51. I'm up to 58.
Okay.
And so I want to hit 75. Certain sequences, as you know, like,
action.
oh, this is going to take, X amount of time. And so if I hit this page count, I should get into the 90 runtime arena. But yeah, it always depends on what I'm doing. So for writing, I try to make sure, generally speaking, I'm reading something to open up like my vocabulary and my imagination.
Nice.
Maybe when I sit down, I will grab a coffee or a tea, and I relentlessly work on my outline over and over and over and over again. Like I can't seem to do it enough, and then until I can just see everything, and then even though I can't always see like the connective tissue, I see the beats, and I know I got to get from point A to point B, and whenever I sit down to write, it just kind of happens. I know that's not super useful, but I think if you just kind of commit to writing it, and you think in writing, like I'm a much better texter than I am like conversationalist. And so all my wit comes out through my fingers. And so that just kind of pops off. Another thing that I try to do, especially when I'm in the heat of it, generally speaking, again, like I turn off music, I turn off podcasts, and I try to just let the ideas marinate. That when I actually do sit down and write, all I need to do is just commit to get something down on the page. And usually all that gestation kind of takes over and it just starts pouring out whether or not I want it to. And so for me, that's really hard to do, like turning off music and podcasts, because I have a very busy mind. And so I can get tortured. Like I can't fall asleep, to silence. I usually put on like Futurama, or something in the background, cut the lights down low, and let my busy mind have something to occupy it so that I was a chronic insomnia kid. Like I would lay down at 9, 10 o'clock at night and not fall asleep until 3, 4 a.m. And so this is finally something that's helped me. I used to listen to music all night, which did not help because I love music too much. But when I'm shot listing, I'll go through like my client notes, on what's important to them and start outlining based on that. And then, of course, you start thinking about what would look amazing. And maybe most importantly is what would be fun to make, what would be fun to film. That gets your creative juices going. And then, maybe dig up some reference photos, hit Pinterest or Google Images, and then just kind of build a giant list of cool shots, and start with everything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't have the tools, just start with it. And then you can start kind of culling for which of those shots tells a story, which, do you have the gear for? And then I start organizing my shot list based off of, what helps me plan to shoot, my gear needs, etc. And then for a production day, that's different. That's its own animal, because I usually spend the night before production walking through the shot list, visualizing what I want, almost like in sports. I don't know if you played football. But in away games, right. In away games, you get on the bus and your coaches will tell you stop all the the lollygagging and grab butt and start thinking about the plays, running through your plays in the head. And so I would sit and run plays through my head. Like, here's my assignment, here's my cues, here's what I'm doing. And so it's the exact same thing whenever I'm getting ready for production day.
Well, I didn't play football that way. I was just playing football on the streets with my
You're just
friends.
loosey knocking it out.
Just
Hey, some
10
people are
out,
just
10,
super talented.
5 alligators, you know, all I had for the punt.
And so like I'm working through these things in my head so that the hard thing about production is you have to be creative on time. Like you can write as creative, inspiration happens, but on a production day, you have to be creative on time. Like
Yeah,
that's a different animal. And so for me, I don't storyboard. I really don't like storyboards personally.
me either. Wes, I have
Really?
a revolution. I want a storyboard revolution right now. Okay.
Yes.
Can I just say this right
Yes.
now? Okay. I can't draw. And I give the shot list. I'm like, you don't need a storyboard. Let me give you the shot list. You know why? The storyboard is not going to represent exactly what I'm going to give you. Like, can I just say this, everyone out there?
It
Okay.
just cannot happen.
I've tried. And it's not going to look the same. Just do a shot list and use your mind.
It's so much more freeing because once you get on set, now you have creative flexibility.
Yeah.
On the day, you're not married to this image. Instead, you're married to an idea. Like I need a medium close up. Maybe I need a slider shot. I need a push in, and that's all you need to know. Okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Here's the day. Here's what the light's doing to me today. Now I can just knock out the frame that I've written, and it can be any number of things, and we can shift and shape and work based on what's happening that day. And it's so much easier. And I think it just creates more possibility instead of reducing it to just one possibility.
That's right.
And so with
Love
editing takes a different creative flow. Like I love hate editing. It's a combination. And so for me to get into my creative flow with editing, I literally just convince myself to organize the footage. Like if I can just sit down, hey, all you got to do right now is organize footage. And then once it's organized, the only thing I need to convince myself to do is, okay, now just comb through footage and make your pulls, make your selects. And then of course, when you're doing that, and this is the trick of it, is because inevitably I hate what I shoot. I walk off set and I'm suddenly terrified that everything sucked. While I'm shooting, everything's amazing. And I'm like, oh, this is going to work. This is great. Second I walk off set, imposter syndrome takes right back over, which I suffer with day in, day out. And I'm like, none of that's going to work. You don't have what you need. You're about to get laughed at. Everyone's going to, think you're crap and you're never going to work again.
Yeah, like my eye lines are off.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Nothing is there. So if I can just trick myself into organizing, making my pulls, what I do in that process is I'm suddenly familiarizing myself with the footage. And whether I want to or not, I'm piecing the edit together in my head. Mm-hmm. And that starts to create excitement about the actual edit. And so now I can just say, oh, I got to see what this is going to look like. Let me just cut this scene together. Let me just see what you know what? Maybe this isn't terrible after all. And I'm just kind of tricking myself one step at a time until I suddenly find myself loving it and excited for the client to see it,
Dude, that's great advice. All the editors out there, I think you should really listen to that. And also with the shot list. And this is really great, Wes, because honestly, like this is like a filmmaker talk. This is filmmaker hour right here. And I'm just so happy that you said, let's do away with the storyboards, because I totally agree. And what's crazy, what you were saying earlier too, was that I'm actually practicing silence as when I'm working, and I have been crushing it lately. Because what happens is when I put on music, my mind goes into places, because I'm a DJ. So I'm like, I can mix this music into that, or I'm like, oh, what happens if I'm on stage and I play that, and I start like getting really into it. And what happens is I start going online and start Shazamming songs. I'm like, okay, this is good for this set. And so I've tried to just be silent, and I have been a creative monster lately. I am a beast. Like today, I just I finished 3 edits, like beastly. Like I have my assistant edit it and just threw it back to me, and I was like, cool, bam, 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 bam. And actually, what a tip for everyone out there, what I do is actually I select all my selects, and I just right click and I put speed and duration. And if it's not a dialogue, if it's like a montage, I just make everything 2 seconds. And then from there, I just throw it on some music, and I'm just like, all right, everything's 2 seconds. and then I just shorten or lengthen so it goes to the beat,
Wow.
just to keep it nice and simple.
Dude, that's really cool. That's a really interesting process.
Yeah. No, like, Wes, like I feel like we can keep going on forever. You know what? We're grabbing a drink, my friend. We're
All
grabbing a
right,
drink
man. I'm
after
in.
this. Because like when you look back at your career and everything we've talked about and everything that you've gone through, like why storytelling? What is it? What are you trying to tell the world? What's your message, your theme? With everything that you've done with the client work, your own work, and the work in the future, what's the message and the theme that you're trying to tell the world? And what is the story that you're trying to say?
Yeah, you know what? I've been a storyteller my entire life. I grew up literally, writing all the time. And on the school bus, I lived out in the country in the middle of nowhere. Like my hometown has like 1,200 people in it. And I lived 3 miles outside of that. So I literally was in the middle of nowhere. And on the school bus every day, I would tell story to my buddy. We would sit and I
Oh,
would literally
nice.
just make up these fantasy stories, these
Oh,
crime
shit.
dramas, like in elementary, like
That's
literally.
cool.
And it was fun and it gave me so much joy. Because I didn't grow up with TV, I had movies. Like I didn't get Nickelodeon, and so everything I watched was a film. And I just fell in love with the way that I could be exposed to New York suddenly through a story. I could be exposed to other cultures. I love foreign films. I love things that aren't like me. Growing up in the middle of Texas, white kid, and even though my town was very diverse, for Texas you wouldn't expect nearly half the town to be black and Latin. So it's very very diverse town. But even within that, like I wouldn't know New York without Spike Lee. I wouldn't
Mm.
know LA without Michael Mann. And
Hmm.
so, like, being able to experience all these things, I think it's so important and crucial for people to have experiences outside their own world. And I think ultimately the theme that I would want to insert into everything is one of kindness and want to assume good intentions
Yes.
on other people. I think we're told and taught so much that the world is evil, and that there's so much bad in
Mm.
the world, which there is. Of course, there's bad in the world. But I think if we would just have a little bit more trust in each other, we would be proven right more often than we would be proven wrong.
Wow, that's powerful. That's something that I totally resonate with. And I really respect about you because a lot of people who watch films, they don't see that. They don't, sometimes people just see the entertainment value. They don't really see that these are stories from the director's perspective, the director's background. Like I'm the same way with Scorsese in New York, right? And just like
Yeah.
looking at New York in a different sense. And to me, what you said about bringing people together, it's the reason why I got into filmmaking in the first place, is to bring people together because I watch movies as a family. And my whole goal is to really help bring filmmaking and the video making education to developing countries so that people who don't have access to cameras, they do, and they can tell their stories, so we can hear the stories from developing countries, so we don't think of them as just poor and decrepit, but they actually have something to say in the global conversation and they have the right to say something. And so now I love that about what you just said right now, and I'm all for it, man. I'm gonna support you.
Yeah. I
So,
appreciate you, man.
but other than that, man, I know we can go on forever, but I want you to tell the people out there, especially the young filmmakers and creatives and actors or whatnot, what's your advice to them who want to have that full-time creative career?
You got to be uncomfortable. I mean, you're going to have to pay a price at some point or another. I think if you know where you want to ultimately be, then only do what's going to bring you closer to your end goal. Because, like we were saying earlier, whatever you get known for is what you'll be paid to do. So, build the portfolio, build the reputation that speaks to your passion and to your end game, and be as original as possible. Stay away from copying. I mean, at some point, I know we all take a shortcut. We're pressed and we don't think about it, and we just kind of copy pasta someone else's work. It happens. But try as much as you can to have your own voice and to introduce people, like you were saying, man. There's people. Everyone has their own voice and their own perspective and their own world and story to tell. So be as original as possible. Stay away from templates. Stay away from the fads. It's easy to duplicate like someone's cool transitions or LUT, but it's not going to grow your taste and your skill set. And if you take that mentality into all of your work, you'll stretch yourself. You'll find yourself creating something that you otherwise never would have. And it's going to take that kind of passion, that attention to detail, in order to have your dreams fulfilled, because it can be easy to get down on yourself thinking that there's too many people out there. There's too much competition who wants to do what you want to do. So why should you be the one to get to do it? And the truth is, the fact that you want to do it should tell you something bigger about the market. And this goes back to me being a lover of capitalism. And it's that if you want to do something, that means there's a market for it.
Yep.
There's people who need it. There's people who want to do it. You can help someone fulfill their own dreams and passions by fulfilling your own dreams and passions. And in doing that, you'll also release other people to chase their own dreams as well. And so you're only going to do the world a service and a favor by pursuing your dreams.
Boom. Mic drop. Everyone, please support Wes right now, because that is how I feel as well. You got to be the change you want in the world, but only that, but the character that you want to see in other people. And if you're going to be that hardworking, passionate person that will always go for your dreams and set that example for others, they will do the same, because that's what we are as creatives. We're the ones who are unconventional. We took the unconventional route. We didn't abide by the rules. We were the ones who actually led through our passions, but our passions led us. And some people are very much controlled by what society thinks about them. And it needs people like us to actually be that example, so people can say, hey, I can live that life too. And anyone who out there who is a corporate person and you like that life, it's all good. We need people, who are in finance, who are accountants and doctors and lawyers and nurses. Hell yeah, be that. All you creative 100%. Types who don't like that, consider a life of creativity. So Thank you so much, Wes.
Yeah, man, my pleasure.
You. And before we go, can you let people know where to find you and how could we support?
Yeah, man. If you want to see my work, I usually post my new pieces on the gram at Icarus Burning. You can see my larger portfolio and reel and all that stuff at icarusburning.com. But really, if people wanted to, keep hearing these kinds of conversations, I would love it if they would tune into my podcast, The Pestle. It's called The Pestle Podcast because we take a film, and if you don't know what a pestle is, it's like a mortar and pestle. It's that little stone bowl with the stone slab that you grind corn to make flour. Oh, and so the pestle is where we take a movie and we grind it up to make something new with it. And so it's PESTLE. So yeah, thepestlepodcast.com, or just search for it at whatever you podcast at. Yeah, man, I'll be sure to link you up on and give you a shout out on the show. And I'd love to have you on, man. Let's definitely grab a beer or coffee or something.
Let's do that. No, that's happening in Austin, man. I mean, and at the same time, I would love to break down some old school films, maybe some Kurosawa, maybe some.
We haven't done Kurosawa yet, man. I would love to.
Kurosawa, man. We got to do that.
Jimbo or Seven Samurai.
Oh my goodness, Seven Samurai. Yeah, that's man. The one. But yeah, thanks so much, Wes, and hopefully everyone out there enjoyed this. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Haven podcast. And if you dig it and like what you heard today, please give us a nice review and rating and share it with one of your friends that you think needs some creative inspiration. You can always find more content and resources at thecreativehaven.com, and hit me up on Instagram at Mitchel Dumlao. And if you want to reach out, collab, or ask any questions, you have my permission to slide into my DMs. So keep positive, continue to learn and hone your craft, and create all day. Salamat.